Hi, happy Independence Day. This is the Debrief. Thanks for spending some time with us. I'm Donna King. I'm editor-in-chief of the Carolina Journal. The Debrief here is, it's kind of our breakdown of everything that's happening in politics and public policy every week. It's been a crazy week over the last 7 days or so. So we've got an update. Good crew with us, of course, today. We have David Bass, who's covering all of we need to know about education in North Carolina and public policy. We have Jessica Thompson, who is the Director of Government Affairs for the John Locke Foundation and General Counsel, giving her take on what happened in our state legislative session, and Jeff Moore, Deputy Editor of the Carolina Journal. Okay, first, I have to talk about the debate. We're a week out from that, what by all accounts was a disastrous debate between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. So what do you think, Jessica? What are your thoughts a week out from that?
Yeah.
What's been the fallout?
The fallout has been intense. The
Sure.
Democratic Party has, in a lot of ways, been scrambling to respond to this, really lackluster, embarrassing performance by President Biden at the debate. And, there were times watching that debate that I wish they would cut the international feed, because this is a family matter we need to deal with, and please respect our privacy, because there were times that it was just extremely embarrassing for our country that this is the state of our president. And I think the Democrats have to really do an internal look at, why didn't we reveal this to the public before the end of June, the beginning of July, what the president's condition was.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, to me, it seemed a little like elder abuse. Like, it was painful to watch. I don't know if they overtrained him. We've all done a lot of public speaking. I don't know if they overtrained him. He's trying to cram too much information into 2 minutes. And just, unless you're in that chair doing it every day, you can't do that in 2 minutes, which indicates to me he's not in there doing it every day.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah. It makes you wonder, who really is running the White House and making the decisions. And so I think voters are really going to be impacted by that debate for a long time.
Of course. Jeff, you mentioned something about this when we were meeting eyes going, what the heck's going on over there?
Yeah.
Is he doing it every day? What do you think?
Yeah, I think absolutely not is the answer. And I think a lot of the American people probably understand that. One thing that's notable to me is that we're talking about this debate as consequential, where oftentimes we anticipate the debate, we go into it thinking, oh, they're going to score these points, these zingers are going to get thrown out there. And then really the debates seem kind of lackluster. People aren't totally interested. They're not watching a bunch. And then a few days after, people kind of forget, like the points you scored, like they don't last that long. But with this debate, the reverberations are going to go all the way to Election Day because of just how poor of a performance Biden put in, not on the substance of the debate questions necessarily, but on his actual demeanor and ability to be a strong individual, healthy enough to actually lead the country. So I think the conclusion of a lot of people was the same that they had 6 months ago about his condition, and the difference being that now all the people that were denying those things previously are kind of forced to admit that this is the condition that he's in. So,
well, you're talking about scoring points. Ahead of this debate, I had a column going, okay, here's what I'm going to be looking for. They need to talk to their base. They need to talk to not their base, but they need to be talking to those who might be on the fence. They need to talk about certain kinds of policy. I didn't hear any of that. I heard a lot of, pointing fingers and not being able to get your words out and misstatements. Trump, I think, really was able to harness his energy and try and answer some criticisms of Joe Biden. But the anger and animosity, I didn't hear any forward thinking in what they want to do for the next 4 years. Do you think that's what people are looking for?
Yeah, and I think that's the more common refrain after the debate is like, where was the substance? They were just being mean. And when we are in primary debates, a lot of the time that can be the case. And so in the general election, you hope to hear more back and forth about the policy.
Sure.
And if you tune out all of the other factors we're paying attention to when that was on screen, you might have heard some policy debate. Trump was actually pretty smooth and comprehensive in some of his answers. Biden had a lot of stuff, a lot of minutia in some of the answers.
That sucked the oxygen.
But the way he was delivering that minutia was so concerning. So, there was nothing else for this debate. You would like to focus on any policy thing, and it's not the back and forth the meanness of it,
Sure.
but maybe the sense of alarm that America
Right.
seems to have. I saw, I think it was a Time magazine cover that just said panic.
Right.
With Biden kind of exiting the stage.
Sure.
And so the rest of the world's looking at that now too.
It's frightening. It
Yeah.
really is a national security issue.
And frustrating because it's a little bit of gaslighting for all the people for the past 3 years that have seen this. And when people are telling stories from 2019 that the family's frustrated that they're getting him to run for president because they think he has dementia
Right.
4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Right.
So some of this is frustrating for voters, and now that it's like, well, they need to switch them. Maybe that's something we should have thought about back in 2020.
Sure. David, tell me what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, so to Jeff's point, the whole panic issue,
Yeah.
the time constraints are really interesting with
Sure.
that panic because we have the Democrat National Convention just around the corner, less than 7 weeks away.
Right.
So if there was another candidate to jump in, it would have to happen obviously quickly. Some names that have been suggested were the likes of California Governor Gavin Newsom, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, even in Pennsylvania, Shapiro there. All of those candidates, though, what's interesting, if you look at polling where they stack up against Trump, it's not much better, if at all, against Biden. So what would be the advantage there for Democrats? They're going to obviously have to make a decision. But I think just seeing the shock after the debate, immediately you saw the pundit class just absolutely freaking out. There were a few who were trying to spin it, but most everyone was like, how can you spin this?
Sure.
Everyone saw it, and there's no way to explain it away.
Sure. So I heard just through the grapevine there was some talk, or maybe somebody trying to start the rumor that Roy Cooper could be on that short list to jump in there. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's again, I don't see how that would help the Democrats move things forward. I mean, North Carolina, obviously a swing state.
Sure.
That's important, but it seems to be becoming a little bit less of a swing state this year. If you
does.
look at the polling, it's nowhere as close as maybe it was last time around. But again, would Roy Cooper fit the kind of current Democrat, what they're looking for? I mean, he's a Southern white guy. Is he gonna?
It's going to be hard to throw Kamala Harris over for that. Yeah.
Yes. Would they do that? The optics of that?
Right.
I don't think it would work.
Sure. So within hours, CNN, MSNBC put out a poll on Biden's approval rating among Democrats, dropped double digits in 24 hours after that. What happened to their bench strength? I mean, years and years we saw, Democrat after Democrat, new generation, but now it seems like the same people are now trying to shield Biden from the American public.
Yeah, it's like they only have an inch left before the cliff, and they don't have any more real estate to share with anybody. And they used to have a deep bench of developing kind of talent that you get in. You have the rookie of the years and the new politicians that are doing very well in their state, and they hold up. And the way Barack Obama actually came on the scene was kind of like that. He gave a convention speech as a senator from Illinois. And before we knew it, he was president of the United States. And so the Democrats seem to have a deep bench that was actually a pipeline to get to those positions. And it is so apparent now that that is completely gone, because if they had anyone that they could turn to, they would have turned to them a while before, and maybe even in the primary stage of 2020. Because you saw Biden come and sweep from behind after the South Carolina win in the primary during that primary season, and it seemed unlikely at the time. And now it seems that if maybe there had been a deeper bench during that primary season, we wouldn't be dealing with this now.
Right, Jessica, though, this really comes down to policy, because this is a moment not to gloat as someone who's more conservative or even moderate on this spectrum. It's to say, how are we going to move forward? What policies do we want to make sure are a part of reshaping, recovering from COVID, getting kids back on track in school, making sure there's some economic freedom and liberty and growth going on in the country? I'm not hearing any policy in this discussion. What do we need to be focused on? What do we want to hear for the next 4 months?
Absolutely, yeah. I think we want to see both candidates focus more on policy. And, I think the deep bench and also the lack of policy that you're hearing in the debates, I think that reflects that there's a great divide in the Democratic Party between the progressive wing and the more liberal towards moderate wing. And without being able to come to an agreement on those issues, they can't set the terms of the debate. But now President Trump has been able to coalesce the Republican Party in large part behind him, especially after this Biden performance at the debate. And so I think he will be pressing forward with, his discussion about how to improve the economy. We did see him focus on that, and how Joe Biden's policy has made inflation worse in the country. And so I expect he's going to stay focused on those kitchen table economic issues as we move closer to the election.
Sure, it sounds like it. Actually, while we got you, let's talk a little bit about policy in the legislative General Assembly. We had the short session just wrapped up here. It was crazy, the last 48 hours, everything that got through. Can you give us kind of a breakdown of what you saw, what you like, what you don't like?
Yes, definitely. So one thing is that they did not pass a comprehensive adjustment to the budget.
Okay.
And a lot of people are viewing that as a failure. There is one aspect of that I count as a failure, and I think a lot of our colleagues here at Locke view as a failure as well. But the fact that the House and the Senate didn't spend a lot more money on unnecessary programs, on pork, and just spending money because they had it, that really is a victory. Okay. So we should be relieved about that. But you know, one of the biggest disappointments, especially for Locke and a lot of our supporters, is that they did not fully fund the Opportunity Scholarship Program. They expanded Opportunity Scholarship programs to make it universal last year, and then they didn't deliver on that promise. The Senate, that was one of the first things that they took up whenever they came back into session, and they passed a standalone bill fully funding the Opportunity Scholarship. House leadership continued to come out and say, we support fully funding the Opportunity Scholarship. At first, there was some disagreement about where those funds should come from, but we found out late last week that the reason the House didn't pass the funding was because their members wanted additional raises on top of the raises for public school teachers that are already going into effect. They wanted to increase that. And so those students who want to try a private school that better suits their needs are not going to be able to because the public school teachers did not get a further raise.
Oh, interesting. Now, is that Senate standalone bill eligible for consideration when they come back the 10th and then again September or whatever?
It would be, but you know what's unfortunate is even if the House does take it up July 10th, so many parents have already had to make decisions about where they're enrolling their students. Schools have had to make decisions about when to cut off enrollment. And I fear that for the vast majority of people who are eligible, who applied, you know, a record-breaking 72,000 families applied for the scholarship, and they're not going to be able to take advantage of it because of this delay on the House.
Sure. Jeff, tell me, one of the things that we can look forward to in November because of this session are constitutional amendments on the ballot. There's a few on there. Tell us a little bit about what you know of.
So citizen-only voting, which some experts at the John Locke Foundation help bring more awareness to that issue and how our Constitution is not exactly as clear as it could be in limiting voting to just being a U.S. citizen. So that's going to be on the ballot in November, and I think there's also an income tax cap to further ratchet. It reminds me of a ratchet down. We've got the last 10 years of income tax decreases on those rates. We've got a flat tax now, and they've ratcheted it down all the way. But as they go, they've got a current limit, I think that's around 7%. And they want to ratchet that down further to 5%. I think they had polling that actually showed about a 7 out of 10 North Carolinians supporting a cap at a 4% range. So if they can get it down there. So this is a big victory, because if you consider all of the things that you're able to do, it's like pulling teeth to get good policy out of any legislative body. Especially when you're conservatives and with very high principled ideals. But when we are able to have 10 years of tax cuts and then have an opportunity to kind of fix it,
make it
and
permanent,
cement it in the Constitution, that you can't go any higher than that, it's a huge victory for economic freedom and for just our pocketbooks and wallets going forward in North Carolina.
Absolutely. What else caught your eye from this session?
Well, the citizens-only voting amendment, I do want to go back to that. You know, some of the Democrats are saying, oh, this is just a ploy to get people out to the polls to vote. It's already in the Constitution. We don't need it. But Dr. Andy Jackson has highlighted for the General Assembly and in his reporting on the John Locke website that a lot of citizens, like North Carolina's own J. Cole, who was born to U.S. citizens but born abroad, it's not clear under our Constitution that those who have been naturalized are able to vote. And so, you know, I think we should call this the J. Cole Amendment. I think it's fantastic that we'll be able to clarify that and also prevent cities from, you know, stepping out of bounds and trying to allow non-citizens to vote, as they've done in D.C., Maryland, and some other states. Too.
Vermont, I think, is involved in a lawsuit right now over that. Isn't that right?
That's right. And so, you know, adding clarity to constitutional language is very important, and I'm really glad that the legislature took that step this year.
Absolutely. And going back to this idea of school choice opportunity scholarships, this really resonates through the school choice community. And there may be folks that look at this and however many are on the waiting. How many are on the waiting list
like
right now?
55,000.
55,000 families that
yeah.
won't get that. What do you think about that? Because I know you deal with a lot of those folks.
Yeah, so I mean, the General Assembly had funded the first tier, which is the absolute lowest income tier,
Sure.
and then I believe, if I have my facts straight, it was most of the second tier, which is very much low to moderate income.
Sure.
So then you have the third and fourth tiers that were not funded this year, and that's obviously 55,000. I mean, that's a lot of folks. So out of those original 72, a lot of them are still unfunded. That one question is, it's already kind of to what Jessica was bringing up, and Jeff, it's already a little bit too late though in the year, because I know as a family, I have 3 school-age kids. You make these decisions very early in the year. So to be in a position where you're not sure what's actually going to happen on the school side and on the family side, it would be great to see it come through at this point, but I think for a lot of these families it's already too late, so we might be looking at next year for those. What kind of fallout will there be? I mean, I know there's a lot of thankfulness in the school choice community for the expansion, but then not following through on it, it's disappointing.
I mean, North Carolina is a school choice state. I mean, there's a long history to this, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, going back, the program's been around since 2013. I think the first year it was implemented was 2014, so it's been 10 years. It's been very successful. A lot of families have been given school choice through it. Obviously, we have a lot of charter schools here, vibrant homeschool community.
1996, I think, is charter schools. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And
history.
of course, the public schools are still doing great. I mean, 75%, 80% of families are still choosing the public school. But for those who want a different option, North Carolina's made that available. We're heading in the right direction on that.
Do opportunity scholarships, is that part of the overall education budget? When you give somebody a scholarship to go to a private school, is it coming from their local public school?
So no. So the way the funding is set up is, there's a certain allotment through the state, the per pupil funding through the state, and then there's the local funding as well that comes in. So basically, the whole idea behind opportunity scholarships is a little bit more that the money is following the child rather than just going to the school. So if a child is going to a private school, that money is more, following the child and paying for the child's education rather than it just funding an institution.
But the money's not coming out of the public school system.
Right.
It's a funded separately
Exactly.
item.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. We're able to do this, so fortunate to do this on the 4th of July, and I'm excited for everybody to have a great weekend, but really remember what this is about, right? You've got a great column up today, and I appreciate your work on it. Talking about economic freedom ringing.
Yeah.
Give me your thoughts.
No, and this is a popular holiday around John Locke Foundation and Carolina Journal, obviously, and but economic freedom is at the root of it, and I think sometimes we get a little bit bogged down in we have kind of infinite choices and instant communications with everything in 2024, and we forget how much our economic freedom gets chipped away at.
Sure.
So I wrote a column on that. It started with no taxation without representation, and now we have so many areas where we get taxed or we get a burden and we don't have any real true representation. We've got federal bureaucracies, which we had that Chevron decision should put a big dent in that, but you've got these federal bureaucracies that issue rules that have the power of law, that they give a regulation kind of tax burden on everything. You have the EPA that is burying everybody in regulations that make things like housing so much more expensive, and when you're spending 60, 70, 80% of your income on housing, you have much left over for food, you have much less left over for health care, for all the other things you're doing. And so as we think about how freedom rings throughout the United States and in North Carolina, I think a returned focus, as much and as important as the social and cultural issues are, and I think they're extremely important, that they're really driving the moment, but where the rubber meets the road is the economic freedom and how much we have. Because in everywhere that we operate, if they can really just take a piece of us or actually control us, the Fed introducing central bank digital currencies. We passed a bill in the legislature to actually ban North Carolina from participating in any of those experiments because of the invasiveness and the privacy concerns. So when we have threats like this out there, we really need to be on guard, and it seems old and stodgy, and we look back at these old oil paintings of the founding and signing the Declaration of Independence and everything and think that this is it's not really a current time kind of struggle we have, but we struggle every day against these things. And if you see any talk about Bitcoin, realize that the impetus for that is because there's so much control through the federal government and things of that nature. So it's what my columns focus on, is just kind of reinvigorating the focus on economic freedom and how it actually connects to all of the big kind of shiny issues that get in front of us all the time.
Right. You mentioned the Chevron decision. Do you mind if you do give us the top lines on that?
Yeah.
Because it does say a lot about the right to the fruits of your labor, your right to earn a living, feed your children without the government involved.
That's right. And it's also a big case reestablishing the balance of powers between the executive, the Congress, and the judicial branch at the federal level. So the Chevron decision was a 40-year-old decision which required judges that whenever a regulatory agency would come before them, judges were required to defer to that agency's interpretation of the statute, even if the judge thought that there was a better reading that the agency wasn't advancing. That doesn't occur in court outside of the administrative law context. It would actually be a due process violation for the judge to say, no, I'm bound to accept this litigant's position. And so it was just an anomaly that grew to exist in administrative law. And we saw the overgrowth of the administrative state. And we also saw Congress slow down on passing substantive, specific legislation to address issues. And that's also when you saw agencies take power to force vaccine mandates, like we saw during COVID. For the executive branch to pass student loan forgiveness. So these programs of huge economic and political significance, the Supreme Court had to carve out those questions of the Chevron doctrine because it was just so clearly in violation of the balance of powers at the federal level. And so the Loper-Bright decision overturned Chevron. Now judges are required to rule in cases or controversies, state what the best reading of the law is, and then apply it. And part of this decision came down to the premise that agencies are experts, but the experts in the law are the judges on the federal bench. They are the ones who, under our Constitution, are responsible for interpreting statutes. And Congress is responsible for passing those laws, and not a federal agency who finds an ambiguity somewhere and says, oh, we can use this to benefit our side or the policies that we want to advance.
This is fascinating to me because it seems like to me, not being an attorney like you are, that all of these symptoms that we saw, this overreach of the government, reaching into farmers' pockets and fishermen's pockets and our pockets and COVID vaccines and all those, the disease was this.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's been taken out by the root in this decision?
Absolutely. And so there are a few lines in this opinion that says the courts should, respect the expertise that agencies bring about. And, as I mentioned, the court had carved out exceptions out of Chevron with the major questions doctrine. The court itself, the Supreme Court, hadn't applied Chevron since 2016.
Really?
They had been sending the signals to the lower courts. Chevron is not the direction of the future, but the lower courts didn't accept it in part because the administrative agencies kept pushing the envelope and trying to aggrandize their own power. And now finally the Supreme Court has stepped in and said, no more, this is the limit. But I don't think that the federal agencies are going to take that lying down.
Well, that was my next question, right? Because to me, when you say federal, when you say administrative agencies, that's the government. That's our interface with the government. So when we say the government overreach, it's these administrative agencies. What are they going to do? They're not going to just sit back.
I highly doubt it. I am sure that there are a lot of agency attorneys looking at what are the statutes that we have favorable rulings on that we don't want to continue to press, but what are the areas where we still may try to press for more. And hopefully, if the decision does what it's supposed to, these attorneys at these agencies are going to say, how about we just go to Congress and we ask Congress to pass a law to do the things that we would like to do instead of them trying to do it themselves, because of course they're unelected bureaucrats, and it should be the people's representatives that are crafting policies.
Absolutely, which goes back to our term limits idea. That's the risk, right? Absolutely. Is that you would have people who were not elected running things. What are your thoughts? Government overreach is a big problem.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think immediately of like the kitchen table issues, including the issue of inflation with what we've seen over the last few years with a lot of issues of government overspending in the economy, and just comparing what life was like 2019 compared to what life is like right now for a lot of families and individuals out there. There's a real cost to these sorts of things. So to see that the importance of economic freedom and people having enough to support their families, support themselves, and really just live a life that's robust.
Sure. Have you seen this trend of people calling up their Walmart cart from 4 years ago?
Depressing.
Fascinating. So if you ever order your groceries on Walmart, you can call up your cart from 4 years ago and reorder it and see how much it would have gone up. People are saying, okay, my $115 cart is now $415. It's all over TikTok. Fascinating to see how much, and that is where real people who maybe don't know what the Chevron decision is, didn't even see the debate, they're seeing the true impact of what's happening. Tell me what you think.
Yeah, that just shows you, because you can get online on Walmart and you have infinite choices.
Sure.
And Walmart's going to have the most reasonable prices of everything, and you can get pretty instant gratification.
A sponsored thing.
No, I'm sorry. The big box retailer is going to have lower overall, just because economies of scale and everything. So, but even though you have that, you are trapped by the things that you cannot control, and you don't have any true representation for. All of the spending that went on in Congress, all the COVID money, all the monetary kind of stimulus is happening from the Federal Reserve that they're trying to mop up now. Americans don't have any direct effect on these decisions being made. We're kind of at the mercy of what these experts are always deciding. And so we pay the cost, and costs at Walmart that are 3 or 4 times more than they were just 4 or 5 years ago. So I think that it is the economic freedom that the country is founded on is fading fast. And I think because of technology and communication and kind of the scales of how small this world is, we don't see it quite as well and as starkly as we might when things get a little bit more uncomfortable.
Sure. Okay, good food for thought. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for joining us. Have a great 4th of July.